Welcome to Women at Halftime podcast, but not just for women, for you men too. If you're at mid-career or the halftime of life, our inspirational topics are not only fun, but also meant to help you maximize and write your next chapter. Right here with me, Deborah Johnson. Well, hello, everyone. So excited to be at the Women at Halftime podcast today. I have a wonderful guest. Oh, I'm always excited about guests, but I'm especially excited to have Stephanie Doble here. And I've met Stephanie a bit ago. We were in a course, actually a couple years at least ago. And she has an amazing story. And I'm going to let her tell a lot of that story. And just to remind you, as this is being broadcast, our podcast broadcast, we do have a lot of things. Make sure you're on our newsletter, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. And that will get you all of our current offerings. I've got a lot of music. We've got a lot of, every week we come out with an article. I have Hero Mountain Summit coming up, heromountainsummit.com, by the way. That's coming up. I only open it up twice a year. And of course, we have lots of books. You can always see them right behind me on the banner. So anyway, that's enough introduction from me because Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Deborah. Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
nice
it's just
you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So your smiling face and you have an amazing story. And, instead of me doing this long introduction, I'm going to let you tell a little bit of that story because what should pique everybody's interest is this title of this, From Junkie's Daughter to Unstoppable Woman. I mean, okay, so let's give us a little bit of your background, Stephanie.
Yes, I will. So, the way that I tell the story usually is that, I'm the daughter of a junkie. But it's only recently, in the last couple of years, that I've been able to say that to you, Deborah, or to say that to anyone. For anyone that's been through a story like mine, or even not like mine, but one that maybe has some shame, or if maybe you're embarrassed, or whatever the story is that you told yourself or society has told yourself. For me, it was the one sort of label or the one truth. It's a truth that I tried very hard to get away from. And so, for years, I sort of tried to make it seem like it wasn't true, or distance myself. Like the word that I usually use the most is sort of distance myself from the truth. And, what could I do in my life that would take me sort of as far away from being a junkie's daughter as possible? Could I become an executive in a big company? I think I probably could. Could I create beautiful things instead of, the things that are sort of like ugly and connected to, addiction? So, the biggest part of my story, I think, is that I never planned on telling the story. And I think that, Deborah, from us working together, in some of our classes and some of the work we did on writing and, public speaking, is that, it took a very long time and some traumatic events actually that happened that sort of catapulted me into, not only needing to talk about it, wanting to talk about it, feeling confident enough to talk about it. So I would say like sort of the baseline of the story is that it's always been a truth. I've always tried to distance myself. And in the last 5 years, I've decided that it's something that I need to tell. And so I'm here to start telling the story.
It's so inspiring. In fact, just this morning, I spent time and, reflection, a little bit of devotional and all of that. And I was really reflecting on stories like yours make those of us who have not had to go through some of that trauma. It should make us extremely thankful and grateful, even more so than what we are. And it does. For me, I am so grateful. When I hear your stories, I hear those that have had to go through really traumatic events in your life. And it should make us who have not had to go through a lot of that trauma just extremely grateful. And I feel so honored to be able to tell some of the stories. So I really appreciate you getting to the point where you can tell that story, because I really feel so much of it is going to help people get beyond, their own personal little issues, thinking, oh, wow. I mean, there's a lot more that I could be thankful for, especially this time of year. My goodness, it's wonderful. So let's start out with just a couple things that you can answer for me, because there's something called
Sure.
Pain Street.
Yes.
Payne Street. And I tried to look that up and like, where is it? What is it? And this whole thing. Can you enlighten us a little
I
bit?
can, I can. So, Pain Street is actually there were 10 years. So in the 80s, basically from 1980 until 1990, my mom, who was a heroin addict, she wasn't sick when I was little. She wasn't actually sick. She didn't start her addiction until I was 7.
Wow.
And she had, this is back, sort of in the 70s, and, people sort of society's perspective on postpartum depression, right? Like, in some of those things that are very normal things that people go through, that was sort of like taboo to talk about those things. And so she experienced that in her life. And, she went to doctors and sort of said, I've got this problem. I've got this problem. And, they said, go get your hair cut, or, like little things, they kind of sort of like, told her, don't worry about it. You'll feel better. And she didn't. She didn't. And so after having, three kids, she got together with one of her cousins who had actually been in a motorcycle accident and had lost a leg. And her cousin had said, the only thing that I've ever found that was strong enough to help pain, like the pain you're describing, was heroin. And so
Wow.
she said, maybe you could just try it once, but, we now know that that's not really an option, right? Any of those things at that level are not an option. And so she started with the drugs, and it only took one time. So from being, this sort of like idyllic family with this idyllic sort of beautiful mother, it was sort of within a couple of months, she was, like a junkie, And so anyhow, but the street that we lived on when we were growing up during those years was actually called Pain Street.
Ah,
And it was a dead end street. And, we had a little Cape Cod style house that was there. And actually, the house from the outside, because when we moved there, mom was still sort of okay. But the house from the outside was idyllic. We had a collie named Lassie, the little, kids running around. And, but on the inside, progressively it became more and more like hell. But it all happened on Pain Street. So a couple of years ago, when I started realizing that, I had a story to tell, and started realizing that sort of, these 3,650 days where all of sort of like the worst of it happened on Pain Street. And so that's sort of become this sort of like umbrella or the cover for the story. And so, I usually say, wasn't it lucky that the name of the street was Pain Street? People are sort of, well, I don't know if it was lucky exactly, but it certainly was. It certainly was appropriate. So Pain Street really is sort of the street that it all happened. So, it actually, it's a real place. And it was a moment in time. But when I'm telling speeches or talking about it, I believe that everybody sort of has their own version of a Pain Street, a time in their life or a moment or a traumatic experience where something sort of happened that, potentially, changed the trajectory of their life, and so I think we all sort of have a Pain Street. And for us, it was, the house that we grew up on, where all of these things happened over the course of 10 years.
I just love the sort of it's called Pain Street, but it's spelled
Yes.
different than PAIN. It's
Right.
PAYNE.
Right.
So it's such a good reminder to you and to,
Yeah.
to those that you speak with and those that you tell your story with. It's just what a great sort of visual there that you're able to have. And it should really keep helping you too in your own journey, because from what I know, the little that I know, so much more, but addiction doesn't just go away.
Right.
And to have some of those, prompts in your life or feelings in your life and to go back. So just to remember your story and to be reminded of your story is so great for you and for your emotional health and mindset,
Yes.
I can imagine.
It's
So
it's been interesting, Deborah, because, and we'll kind of talk more about it as we kind of get into this, but I've had moments lately, like in the last, year and a half or 2 years, where I felt like the origin story is Pain Street, but the, sort of the lessons that I took from it are so much more beautiful than that.
Yes.
and I don't believe that I am who I am in spite of those things. I believe that I am who I am because of those things, right? And so the stories I've been wanting to tell, as I kind of start like, shifting into, whatever is next, are sort of like the beauty on the other side of Pain Street. So it's been a really interesting journey, I believe. It's sort of, I thought I would spend a long time, writing all about Pain Street, all of the lessons. And I sort of thought like my life's work would be some evolution of Pain Street. And what I'm finding is, like those stories are, the origin story, but they're not really the truth of the story anymore, because I'm sort of going past that into something that is incredibly beautiful and, and also true.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so
It's just,
it's been
yeah,
fun.
it's so, I mean,
Yeah,
just your smile radiates that, which is so great.
yeah,
How
it's great.
fun. And I noticed that even as we were together, and,
Yeah,
it's been a little bit of time since then, because you really had to get to the place where, okay, now I'm ready to really
right.
even tell it
That's
at this
right.
point.
That's
So,
right. That is right. Yes.
so let's talk about some of your personal strengths, and that you really feel did come from your story and from what you've gone through, because we know, the hard times make us stronger. That's what the songs say, and that's what the people keep telling us, and we're going, really, come on now. This is really, but they really do, in many different ways, if you can tell the story. So what are some of those strengths that you feel, kind of the standout strengths that you feel like you came out of your story with?
The main one that I usually call it is radical resilience. And the reason that I sort of add the radical in front of the resilience is just because I think my perspective of, as things are happening, like let's say as there's something, a dark moment, or, maybe it's like, when you're not feeling well, or maybe it's the death of someone I love. It used to take a long time for me to process that trauma, or a long time to kind of process the sort of, why is this happening? And sort of where I've gotten to now is a place that in the moment that it's happening, I'm sort of going very deep and sort of in a very quiet place and listening to my heart, and sort of saying, this is all happening for good, and sort of trying to glean out of that moment, in the moment, versus like, waiting weeks, days, months, years for that sort of to pass and then to see what the lesson is. I'm trying to sort of learn it in the moment. So it's resilience, but I've been, sort of calling it radical resilience. There's also some things that I think are my greatest strengths that are also the things that I think are probably the greatest things that I still need to overcome. And you've probably heard that with people too. It's sort of like the blessing and the curse. It's sort of like, the thing that makes you sort of the strongest or the most capable is also maybe sometimes the thing that holds you back a little bit. And I would say one of those things is generosity.
Wow.
So, I have a very generous spirit, a very generous heart. I have the heart to serve. But I think I've also, the pendulum can swing, I think, a lot to sort of maybe being over generous, or we often hear a lot of times, make sure you're putting on your own face mask before everybody else's. I'll still sort of resort to the helping everybody else before I put on mine. So I would say that some of these things that are my greatest strengths are also still the things that I'm actively working on to make sure that I can continue to be strong and learn from those. So I would say resilience is absolutely one. Generosity of spirit, definitely. I have a deep spirituality, so I absolutely, believe that there is there's, a bigger why, and a bigger
Right.
purpose. And I'm always sort of, questioning, am I doing the right thing for good? Always. And then I would say that, I also, live in a state of joy, joy
Oh,
and
that's
gratitude.
wonderful.
So I would say like all of those things are probably things that, I may have had those things. It's hard to know sort of, if those 10 years and some didn't happen the way they happened, would I or wouldn't I, nature versus nurture. It's hard to say what's what, but I can certainly say that I've been, battle tested on some of those things. And
Yes.
I can sort of, confirm that, even in those moments, I'm still joy filled. And even in those moments, I feel resilient. And even in those moments, I still want to give, as much as I possibly can give. So I think those are probably, from my perspective, the things that I'm sort of the most aware of in terms of my strengths. there could be some things I'm not aware of, So
Yeah, but we find out some of those things, and I'm a big proponent of journaling and of spending
yes,
time of just thinking, because
yes,
we don't think, excuse me, we don't spend time thinking and reflecting nearly
right,
enough. We,
right.
just go on, and I'm a doer, I'm a creator all the time. It's almost, I'm working on something, and it's important. That's why in the mornings, as I said, I take time and go through my personal reflection and a little devotional. I'm a definite a woman of faith. I mean, if you don't believe there's some bigger thinking, you need to go out in nature somewhere and just kind of look and see what's around us too, and also in your life. And when we think about blessings and curses, sometimes that's, when you're gifted with talents and all of these other things too, and you're going, it's a blessing and a curse. You want to use it, but yet, okay, where and what do you do? And there's a lot of things that come up that way that can happen. So there's, all of those sort of proponents in there. But that's exciting that you have affirmed some of those areas. And I think as we continue to affirm our strengths, it helps us to be able to serve others even more, because we understand I can use this really, and I can really help other people on this as well. So that's a definite plus for you. That's wonderful. So,
Yes.
well, what sort of advice could you give that you actually wish you had followed? Because there's a couple things that, we've thought about, okay, what would I say to my younger self? We just did put out a podcast on that one of my husband and I, who are on, we're on together on the podcast once a month. I drag him in, and he has a lot of wonderful things to say to the guy.
I love that you guys do that.
Yeah. And
oh, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. So, I have wanted to give a platform to really hear some of his wisdom, and I'm more regimented, making sure I get stuff done. He has a ton of ideas all the time. I think I need people to hear this, so we do this. We did what we would say, and kind of from different perspective. But when we look back, and this is what your little question is, I think, what advice do you wish maybe that you could have followed, and that would serve maybe as some warning signs for others, and some of the main truths from that advice?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there, and they're all really good.
Yeah,
good
that's a big deal.
I think we touched on it a little bit, in terms of, make sure you're caring for yourself. You can only take care of other people to the extent that you take care of yourself.
Right.
I think there is sort of for anyone, and it doesn't have to be in a situation like mine, like the way that I usually say it, and you'll hear me say words like this a few times, and, when we're talking, but, I say, well, we're all not all lucky enough to have had, a junkie for a mom. You've heard me say that before, Deborah.
Yes, I have. That's wonderful.
We're not all sort of lucky enough to have had that experience, but but we all have something. We all have something, and if that something is anything like my something, I think you sort of go into survival mode. In fact, I know that to be true. And sort of, the survival is making sure that everybody else is cared for. The survival in it is, sort of, is everyone, clean clothes for school, or does everyone have food, or is everyone cared for, or is anyone sick? And I think, the person, the last person that gets taken care of is, me, or in the case, whoever it is that's doing all the caregiving. And it doesn't have to be in a family like mine that was sort of as broken as mine. It can be sort of in any situation where, we're so worried about taking care of everybody else that we sort of forget to put ourselves first. And we sort of, I know for me, I've thought for a long time, I don't think it anymore, but for a long time, I thought that it was selfish to do that. I thought it was very selfish to sort of, put myself first and sort of take care of my own health or my own needs or my own money. I think women, especially just to my experience, we don't go on the golf course as much and kind of talk about it. And it's not sort of, something we talk about during the game. We talk about other things. And so there's a lot of things that I think, I sort of thought, well, if I put those things first, that I'm being selfish. And what I'm learning absolutely is that, the advice that I heard a long, long time ago in terms of put yourself first isn't actually the most selfish thing you can do. It's sort of the least selfish thing you can do, because then you have so much more you can give back to others. So I think, that would be the main thing that, as I'm learning, it's like, wow, that is really a truth. that, it's probably one of the more difficult things to do, but it's one of the better things. And there's little things that I've done that actually sort of, allow me to give myself a little bit of time in doing that. Like, I'm a big subscriber to sort of this idea of waking up at 5 a.m. I think people call it the 5 a.m. club, right? And it's sort of this, it's not a real thing, but it's kind of a real thing. And it's a whole group of people that believe that if we get up at 5 a.m. before the world sort of starts at 6:37, we give ourselves a good 60 or 90 minutes to kind of, for you, it's going in and it's journaling. For some people, it's meditation. For other people, it's going for a run. For some people, it's taking a cold shower and just kind of, letting it all go. But those minutes in the morning, I find for myself are, absolutely critical to sort of making sure I have what I need before I start every day. So I think, I'm definitely doing it now, and it's made a huge difference. Even I think, Deborah, in the way that, I'm able to show up for a discussion that you and I have been talking about for 2 years.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we've been talking about it, and it's sort of, before I was doing these things and putting myself first, it's sort of, I couldn't fathom sort of, getting up the courage to do it. And when you kind of flip the switch and put yourself first, all these things seem possible, and not just possible, but fun.
Right. That's really important. I'm an early riser, by the way. In fact, even a little earlier than 5.
I could have guessed.
I always say I get up with the cows, because I was born on a dairy farm.
Of course you do.
I get up way, but it really makes a difference in the day. And, taking care of yourself. I've given myself permission. I mean, I take more baths, just little things like that. As a woman, especially a woman, I have the perfect size bathtub, so I will not drown. And I read and I do, it relaxes me when I have time. I don't always have time, but it is, you give yourself some permission to do some things for yourself, to have a little bit of that extra quiet time or whatever you need. Yep. And especially as women, we keep so busy. I've raised a family, I've done all of this, and a lot going on still. Yeah. I mean, I have adult kids, but there's a lot going on. So, there's just, with all of the things that we tend to handle, especially as women, I know men do too. My husband handles a lot, and I appreciate it a lot, but it's just a little different, and I think and I'm a driven personality, type A, he's more type B. So there's just different things that we all deal with. And so for you, giving yourself permission that you can take care of yourself, you can stop and just, you need to just take a day sometimes off. You need to get outside. You need to do all of those things. That's extremely, extremely important. And just so we can give more to others and feel like a person. I mean, it's really, and young moms, I tell you what, young moms, you definitely need that time, even though you're feeling all of this responsibility, and it's okay. It's okay. And that's what grandparents are for, by the way. So, you can take them for a couple hours. We can do it. We can do it. We're ready to give them back, but we can do it. So, awesome. Yeah. So I think that's such a wonderful. I'm so excited you were to that point. This is really a privilege to hear that story. I hope people are just really listening. So, okay, so you have this beautiful smile on your face. And I mean, I'm a woman of faith, and I know you have many things that you believe in too. Not sure where you're at and whatever, but you have joy. And that is what gives you joy, that you really feel lucky because you've gone through such a journey. And your journey does not end. This is a journey your whole life. So what gives you joy, and is there something that gives you more joy than really anything else? What can you share with us?
You went somewhere with the question, and I sort of heard it, and I'm going to acknowledge it. And then I'll talk about the joy part, because you kind of mentioned something about, like feeling sort of like lucky in there.
Yes.
And you hear me kind of talk a little bit about that sort of, in sort of like a joking kind of way, sometimes in a real sort of way. Sometimes I sort of, use a word like that because the topic can be sort of heavy, very heavy, if it's something that you're not familiar with, or maybe you thought you were going to listen to me today and I was going to talk about something that was, maybe a little bit less heavy. And then you hear the topic and you're like, are we talking about, addiction? Are we talking about heroin? Are we like, it's so heavy. So sometimes I'll actually use words that are a little bit more sort of light, just to sort of like let everyone know, like, we're okay. We're
Yeah.
all okay, but I'll just kind of talk about that for a second, because I actually feel that, you know, we're lucky, or I'm lucky, just to be able to put the thoughts together, to be able to have a conversation like this and to be able to share it. I don't know if that sort of makes sense, but like at the most sort of like basic level, to be able to sort of like to me, it's sort of the most essential human needs, of, having food on the table, of having, a roof over the head, of having, people that we can talk to, of, having the enough of a, clarity of mind to be able to go through experiences and articulate them, to be able to have community and fellowship and, all of these things. I mean, so for me, it's sort of, it isn't in the more superficial things. I believe that I'm lucky to have enough talents to be able to cobble together, the sort of story, that is sort of this, origin story of sort of a very dark place, and be able to sort of articulate it and feel it in a way that actually I can sort of explain with some level of clarity, with some level of joy, what it looks like on the other side, because I don't know that is something that everyone can do. And so I feel very lucky, or very fortunate, blessed, whatever we want to call it, to be able to sort of articulate that. Right. And then for me, the joy comes from the little things. I was very joy filled when you heard my story and you said, you know what, I actually think that maybe we should talk about that and let other people listen in. I thought, yeah, you know what, like, I love that. I don't know that I was ready to talk about it when we first talked about it, but it filled me with joy that as a society, as a world, as a people, that we're actually ready to talk about some things now that we couldn't have talked about in the 70s or in the 80s. These topics were taboo. When my mom was going through it, as all the women were going through it, and as people are still going through it in different things today, we can't always talk openly, or even today in other cultures, like we can't always talk about these things as openly as you and I can. And it brings me incredible joy that we can sort of talk about our truths and talk about our feelings and have these moments of connection without being afraid to have the conversation. So I think, there's a lot of different levels of joy. Like there's
Yes.
the walking on the beach, there's the
Yes.
joy of taking little vacations, there's the joy of there's a lot of joys. But I think fundamentally, like under it all, there's sort of this like joy of being able to, at this moment in time, during this point in history, being able to tell a story and be allowed to tell the story, and the world with open arms saying, like, we're ready to hear it, is just, it is a gift beyond measure, in my opinion.
And you're grateful for that, because a lot of times our gratefulness and our thankfulness, it leads to more of the feeling, because we feel like, yes, and we can reflect on that. And that's exactly what you're doing. And it's just, I mean, that's exciting. I mean, yeah, really, it was literally at least 2 years ago that we talked about this. I don't know. Time has passed so fast. I am just, it's, you know what? It passes faster the older you get. So it is.
We don't know anything about that, but
my gosh,
I've heard it's true.
I know. I don't know anything about that, but but it's such a joy to hear you, because I know you've gone through your own journey to even be able to share this, and it's 100%. Such a privilege to me. It is such a privilege to be able to help people tell their stories, because there's. I have people ask, well, that I usually kind of handpick a lot of people too that I have on my podcast, because, different people from, I get a million people telling me, oh, I'd like to do it. I'd like to do it. But, I like to tell some different stories, and from people at different backgrounds. And I think it's because you can draw out some of these principles that, they're not the normal. They're just, you come from a really unique place. And for you to even be willing to share that, is a big deal. It is a big deal. So what still keeps you up at night? And that's a really interesting thought to me, because, all of us have nightmares or different things, and you go, where did that come from? What? Oh, almost brings fear. So what kind of keeps you up a little bit at night?
There's sort of two things. And the first one is there's a lot more that I want to tell, that I feel called to tell. If I'm answering the call of my purpose here on life, I feel like it's very clear that the path that I was on, the one that I thought was the right one for me, has kind of proven to be partially true. And then there's this other path, which is the one of like, get out there and share as much as you can for the whole rest of your life. And, it's what keeps me up is that there's so much to tell. And, I'll just kind of give you a peek behind the curtain of some of the things that I've been thinking. So, one of the things I've been thinking is, I have a blog. And, every week I write a story about Payne Street, and they're all a little bit different. Sometimes they're heavy and sometimes they're very light. Like, so for instance, one week I'll talk about, there was a lady, a very kind and generous woman in our church. And she used to make us, during the worst of the time, she used to make us cookies, chocolate chip cookies. And she would actually bring us those cookies, but she was the only one that thought of us in that way. She was the only one that thought of us as, kids who needed cookies and love instead of ragamuffins, children of a junkie, And so I talk about how, a cookie sort of changed my life. And then at another story, I'll talk about something very serious. But, I have a lot more of those stories. And I always envisioned that those stories would be either, a book, or they would be a movie, so I always envisioned sort of like having the most amount of people possible sort of hear the message, and in whatever way it would resonate or touch people, that's sort of out of my hands, but just to get it out there. So that's the one thing that keeps me up at night, is sort of, did I wait too long to start sharing?
Interesting. That is an interesting. Yeah.
Did I wait too long to start sharing? So that actually is the first thing. And so even when I reached out to you, I had already been thinking that way. I thought, there is no time like this moment. I'm never going to, I am who I am. I show up how I am, but I must reach out to Deborah and let her know that there is no time like the present to connect and start sharing the message. So that is a truth of, it keeps me up at night. Did I wait too long to start telling it? And, will I be able to share all of it? Will I be able to share all of it? So that's one. Then there's actually a second thing that keeps me up at night. So there's lots of things, I guess, that keep me up at night. But, the other thing is the other side of the origin story, which you heard me talk about a few minutes ago, which is this very sort of beautiful, soft, generous, kind, forgiving place that I have come to through all of this and because of all of this. And I have sort of an entire plan, a business case, a plan to share that side of the story too, because I think showing the origin story is only half of the story. That is just sort of the what happened. And this other piece of it that I believe is just as important is telling my story and the stories of other people like me who sort of come to the other side, and it sort of catapulted us into this place of purpose and this place of meaning. And I think that both are very important, and they both sort of require time and energy. And so what would keep me up at night would just be, did I wait too long? And I try not to get stuck in that, because it's sort of it's not living in the moment. It's sort of thinking in the past. But if you're asking what keeps me up, that's true. But it's really like, I hope and pray that I have enough time to share all that's in my heart for, as many people, or to as many people that I'm supposed to. Yeah.
That is a great thing, because we don't know. I mean, we don't know what tomorrow holds.
We don't.
And, I'm putting some things in my organization in the back end of my music, because especially my music, because I have so much content, and then I have courses, I have everything else, and, with the speaking and everything and books. But it's important to have stuff kind of ready.
Yes.
And so then, it can be used even more. So I think there's that sort of calling, and just saying, well, I'm ready if this happens, and just to enjoy the journey as you go, I mean, we don't know what tomorrow holds. I have some surprises.
It is what it is.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
a
what
lot
it
of
is, you know?
surprises this year, thinking,
Yes.
really? At this stage of
Yeah.
my life, I'm actually going to be doing that. So it's really interesting how some of those things start developing, and that are little surprises, but that we weren't ready for. And, it's like, okay, well, why not? I'm ready for that. So, well,
Absolutely.
that's exciting though. So, some of that is just other things that you can write. There's never, you always will have a story. So people
Somebody
love
asked me one
stories.
time, they said, what are you going to do when you run out of content? And I said, oh,
And never run out of content.
that's
No.
not going to happen. I'm like,
No.
there's one thing I've been blessed with. I've been blessed with lots of content. Like,
Yes.
we don't have to worry about this, the well running dry in the stories. Like we're
No.
good there, so
There's always a story, there's always a song, there's always
yes, there is. Yes,
there's
there is.
always
I thought
another book.
it was a cute question, right? Because I
Yes,
think
it is a cute one. Yeah.
the stories run out, and like the stories won't run out,
No, they'll never.
I don't know. I just thought that
You
was
just have
really
to be
cute.
be observant. Be
Yes.
observant and
Yeah.
write
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
down.
Love
Yeah,
it.
actually, the
Yes.
more gracefully older we get to, we need to make sure we write those things down. So the
Absolutely.
top of your bucket list is what?
I have a vision, and it was a vision ever since I was very little. Our parents took us, this is before my mom was sick. We would do, little summer vacations, and we went to the beach, and I sort of fell in love with the ocean. We were from Detroit, so the ocean, we had lakes, obviously, but the ocean was sort of a different thing. And so at the top of my bucket list, which I am close to, but I still don't have, is I have a dream of having my writing desk and my baby grand piano overlooking the ocean with French doors that open up so the breeze comes in. So I actually live at the beach now, but I'm on the other side of the ocean. I'm on the other side of the street. And so the top of the bucket list is actually to be able to open the French doors and be able to write and play the piano while hearing the waves crash. So
how cool.
I'm a big fan of the bucket
is that?
I'm a big fan of doing the bucket list, but that's at the top, and that's one that I'm still working on. Yes.
That is so cool, because that's why we live in the house we do now, is because I saw the the windows in the front,
Yes.
and I thought, that's where my grand piano goes. And I love sitting there. We can drive to the ocean. It's, by the way, where we are in Southern California, if you're by the ocean, it's much too crowded. I like the quiet where I'm at, and to be able to look out, and, in our yard area, it's beautiful to be able to do that. And so that is a gift. How fun for that. That's, that's fun.
Just, I just haven't, I wanted that for years and years and years. This has been going maybe 43 years now. That's been the dream. So,
yeah.
So we're going to make that happen. The next time we talk, I'll have that view for us in the background. You know what I mean?
That is so great. A couple of years, we'll do this again. Definitely. It's so much fun to be able to catch up. I do some of those, after a couple of years. So if you had $1 million that you got in one day, how would you spend that? And why is that decision? Why would you make that decision? I thought that was an interesting question to ask of you.
That is an interesting question. There's a lot of things that I probably could do, but staying with the same thought that we've been staying with on this conversation, or through this conversation, I would say that if I had one day in $1 million, I would actually reach out to maybe a ghostwriter, or someone to help maybe with the book or a screenplay. Like, I probably would use this to supercharge some of the work on Payne Street. Because I think, when we talk about sort of, like time is of the essence, or, like sort of fitting this in with all the other things that are going on, which is sort of the way I've been doing it now. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if, there's this opportunity one day, $1 million to sort of, take all the notes and sort of all the ideas and kind of, get someone working on it. I think it's a very sort of practical thing to do, but it's also completely in line with, my vision and sort of my purpose for my life. So I think, at the end of the day, there's many, many things I could do. I, envision like massages and spas and all sorts of things. But I think at the end of the day, I would feel the most sort of satisfied I would feel like it was the best use of a day in $1 million if I actually put all of that into sort of supercharging this one thing that feels like the one thing that would be connected to my legacy. So I think given our topic, that would be the thing I'd pick.
And that is a wonderful way to kind of sum this up, this whole interview up, is you would be investing in yourself for others. And I do that a lot in my business. I put a lot of money right back into my business. And because it's an investment that I can use, it takes money to write books. And if you're an independent, I've gone that route pretty much, and the marketing. Even if you have a book deal, you are marketing. You've got to put stuff out there. I'm always checking that, putting those things out, and the messaging. And there's all of those investments, especially as an entrepreneur. So investing in yourself and in your business to 100%. Be able to magnify it for others. Yes. I think that's a wonderful use. And of course, I'm traveling. I'm doing stuff with my husband now at this point in our life, because we realized, we're on the train. So this is the time to do traveling. I've done a lot for business. And so it's nice to be able to do some of that for ourselves. And we book active vacations to help us stay in shape. So it's
I like it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. So, but it's good. It's really, really good. My husband was a former professional athlete. And I tell you what, there's mindsets that you go through when you can't do what you used to do. There's a definite mindset. We've talked about that. But I think that's so great for you to invest in your business and what you're doing. I think that's great. And there's so much that we can do right now, Stephanie, with AI and with the visuals. I'm a strong believer in video and visuals and all of that. It's huge. It's huge what you can do with that. And the more tools that we can have, equip yourself and use some of those tools. We only have so much time. That's my issue. And you have to hire the right people, but as a creator, but there's so much to that. And so I think that's a wonderful wish that you have.
It's going to be a fun day.
Yes, that's exciting. Well, maybe in 2 years you go, oh, you know what happened?
Yes. I love it.
That's great. Well, Stephanie, how do people get a hold of you? How do they find you? You've written some books. You're, a part of all of that is already. So how do people find where you're at? How do they look you up? You've got some music out too. So yeah.
I do. Well, actually, I'll just tell you really quickly on the music. So for the music, I've had this long-standing dream, that someday Payne Street would be a movie. And so I wrote the music that would become the soundtrack. And so I thought, sort of in the meantime, why don't I just kind of put it up on a few channels and just kind of get a feel, for like some market testing, some sort of decade-long, market testing, just to see if people, what kind of things resonate with people, and just to kind of dip my toe in that pool. So that's sort of the purpose for that. But that's on Spotify. That's under my name. My blog it's on Medium. And now I've actually checked, it is searchable. So you can search by Stephanie Doble. And then if anyone wants to reach out to me directly, I'm actually still at a point where you can reach out to me just by Gmailing me. You can actually just do stephanie.doble@gmail.com. And then I also have an Instagram, which is at Doppelganger. Pick up on my last name there. And I do a lot of really fun things there. So I'll announce things like if there's a book, or, Deborah, I'll put a link up, to our podcast here. So that'll be up there. I also did, a really fun thing when I was turning 50. I did every single week. I actually did one thing that was on my bucket list. And so people followed a lot. Yes. So when you ask me the bucket list question, I'm like, that is a really good question for someone that actively pursued, sort of checking those things off that fun list. So anyhow, any of those ways people can get a hold of me. And I love to hear, what people would love to hear, if there's any topic specifically or, anything like that, I'd love to engage. So that's perfect.
Oh, that's so great. If you're on the newsletter, if you get the articles too, that always come along with these podcasts, I put links everywhere.
Yes,
but there'll be a direct link to be able to get a hold of you as well. And so that's always, that always works well on that end. So Stephanie, this has been great. A reminder for everyone, make sure goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. You can also get a hold of us, Deborah Johnson speaker, DJ Works Music. People love the music, don't they? And it's great. I mean, I've written musicals and it's a passion and you have to be dedicated at that. So anyway, and
you're an inspiration. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you today. And thank you all that have stayed with us this entire time and listening and being with us. And make sure you stay connected with all of us because we love what we do. And we want to keep creating impact and helping people in their own journeys. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And I'll look forward to being with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. It is because of our wonderful listeners like you that we keep going strong week after week. We'd love it if you'd share and follow us to not miss a single show and even write a review. You can also find all of our articles, products, and links at womenathalftime.com.